Hello, pickle friends, and welcome back to Inside the Pickle Jar. This is the podcast for neurodivergent adults and everyone who loves and supports them. Today's conversation is one I'm really interested in because it touches on something most of us in the neurodivergent community think about but rarely talk out loud about it. So, what happens to the people we love when we can't be there for them anymore? And that's especially an issue for parents of children with level 2 autism or level 3 PDD-NOS or similar diagnoses, for anyone who is the primary support system for a neurodivergent loved one. And that question lives somewhere close to the surface. You're caregiving today, right now, doing something that requires everything you have. And somewhere in the back of your mind is this other question that's harder to face. What is the plan for when I can't do this anymore? My guest today has spent his career sitting inside that question with families. Raymond Lavine is the principal at Lavine LTC Benefits and co-author of the Amazon book, Empathy and Understanding in Business. He has helped thousands of individuals, families, and businesses prepare for long-term care. And his path to this work was shaped by his own family story. Raymond grew up the son of immigrants who fled persecution, served in Vietnam, and then watched his mother, an attorney, rely on her long-term care plan for 18 years. He knows firsthand what thoughtful planning protects and what its absence costs. And what I love about Raymond's approach is that he resists the idea that planning is only for the wealthy, or only for the old, or only for people whose lives look a certain way. He believes planning is how you protect dignity, your own and the people you love. This conversation is for every caregiver who has been putting off the hard questions. It is not going to be about products or policies. It's going to be about people, about families, about what it means to love someone well into an uncertain future. Raymond, welcome to Inside the Pickle Jar. I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you for that introduction. And every once in a while I say this. When Lyndon Johnson, who was a senator and president, when he was introduced and somebody said nice things as you did about me, he would always say, thank you for this introduction. My father would welcome it. My mother would believe it.
And I want to make sure I got your last name right. Is it Lavine or Lavine?
You got it correct. I'm impressed. Yes.
Okay. Just making sure people can find you.
Tony, you're doing well. Continue, good person.
All right. So I want to start somewhere that might seem a little sideways. You grew up in the Hollywood Hills, the son of immigrants who fled persecution, and that's a very specific combination. You have the glitz of Hollywood Hills and the weight of a family history shaped by survival. What was that household like growing up?
Well, actually, it was. I should probably say this on your podcast. Is that I had a wonderful childhood. I just was not happy as a child. I really didn't enjoy being a child, but it was a wonderful childhood. My parents were lawyers. I mean, they're both dead now, but they were lawyers, and they were good. They were interesting and good lawyers. My father did civil litigation, and my mother did estate planning. So, and that's actually how I was begat. And this, I'm sure this is a family program, so. What I mean by begat is my parents met in law school. And this was actually an unusual time, too. And that, in a way, that's made my childhood and my life interesting, as I had interesting parents, and they had an interesting background. But they met in law school in 1941.
Okay.
And it was a distinctive experience because there were many women, I can assure you, that were in law school. So not only was my mother attractive, but she was also intelligent. And then you have a bunch of guys in law school. Anyway, my mother was an attraction, a catch, and as she was an outlier. Anyway, so that's how I was begat. So yeah, well, the interesting thing is when you grow up in Hollywood, it's just Hollywood. It's just, it's where you live. If you grow up in the farm, this is where it is. If you grow up in the city, so I didn't know, that it had that kind of glamour. It's just where you live. And one of the reasons I think we lived in Hollywood was that my mother's parents lived off of Hollywood Boulevard. So they wanted to be nearby. So the Hollywood Hills seemed to be the appropriate place. And the interesting part is that for their entire marriage, They only lived in, they had a home on Ellington Drive, then they moved over a couple of streets to Bennett Drive, and that's where they were for the entire marriage. They never moved out of that area. So anyway, welcome to Hollywood history.
Oh, great. Well, then after you went there, and then after high school, you ended up enlisting in the Army, Infantry Airborne, which I know something
Yeah.
about. And that surprised a lot of people given where you came from. What made you decide to go enlist?
Uh, to simplify, my father served in the CBI, this China, Burma, India in World War II, and he was, he loved the military, he loved the Air Force, and so I sort of, sort of that tradition and DNA. Also, as a, I didn't know what else I wanted to do after graduating from high school. Is that I was not I was an average student. I didn't enjoy high school either, but I endured it. I graduated, so it seemed like a good idea, to enlist in the Army, to enlist because you had the draft and there were all kinds of issues about that. So I figured, why not do that? Get the GI Bill. If I survive all this, then I'll figure things out. But I'll tell you, being in the military, where you grew up in sort of the culture, the Jewish culture, the Los Angeles culture, the Hollywood culture, you're in a bubble, you're in a pod. When you're in the military, it's a it's a conglomerate of everybody. So I met people that, I didn't know what a non-high school graduate was. I didn't know, and I mean, it may seem naive, and I was, is that, what do you mean you're married at 18 or 19? What does it mean you didn't graduate from high school? I mean, they just had, what do you mean you don't know how to make your bed? What do you mean you don't know how to, have hygiene? What do you mean come, that you had this kind of, rural life or a big city life? And so I was introduced, and it was in a way it was a shock, but in a way it gave me humanity, also a form of empathy. Is that just because where you live, there people grow up and have different experiences, and it's a good idea to know that not everybody is going to be like Raymond. Not, they're gonna have different backgrounds and experience. So that was a great learning experience for me. That doesn't mean I always liked it, but it was a great learning. It's said to me, just because I think a certain way doesn't mean somebody else is going to have the same point of view, and that's okay because in the service you got to learn how to cooperate. Even if you don't like each other, even if you have different points of view, you got to cooperate, because in the things that I was doing, it was, it was life and death. This was not playing around. The unfortunate part is that you had older people make the policy and the younger people that are carrying out this, policy. I mean, it was Vietnam. And so there were a lot of issues about that. They brought in a lot of people, and there were a lot of problems. They were really recruiting people that were really not appropriate, never should have been in the military, a lot of problems. So, I had experiences. What I'm getting at is that I got experiences, I got an education, and thank you, the taxpayer, for doing this for me. I got an education in life experiences that I probably never would have had, because I went back to, you go back to your pod or your bubble, and, maybe you expand it, but it gave me that experience that I never would have had I not done that. So as many interesting things that happened, there are also not so interesting thing, is that I got exposure to life at a young age that I think, has helped me, to be more appreciative, to be more empathetic, to be more understanding than than I might have, and unless I had a lobotomy or something that, or transformation to change it. That was really a good experience. So when I came back, then I said, what's my plan? And my plan was, then I said, I really need education. And so that, then I began the educational experience. I attended community college for a couple of years, and then I got accepted to University of Southern California, and then then I got a job, and then eventually I got an MBA. And so, it was my life has been, since then, a process of learning. and of experiences. And then, along with doing the long-term care benefits, we've also been very involved with the autism community,
Mm,
autism spectrum, because my daughter and my wife, producer, founder of United by Music North America, which is a group of musicians that they're on the spectrum, and we don't say disability, and we don't say whatever it's they're on the spectrum, and we're all on the spectrum. I probably am on the spectrum myself, and so I've had a great deal of experience, with the parents and with some are not, I mean, just kids. I mean, a lot, they're also adults. Some are better functioning than others,
mhm,
but very involved. There was a group in Holland, United by Music, and it was started there, and then my wife and my daughter expanded the program in the United States, but it's different in Europe where they have more social services and ways
mhm.
that they help people with neurodiversity. We don't have in the United States. We sort of, but we not it. We but it's not as either companies or countries or areas are not as they don't provide the infrastructure and sometimes and the funding to help kids, or people that have neurodiversity. And the reason for it is they care about it there. Here, it's you're isolated, and yeah, there's social. You can have Medicaid, you have social services that help those with neurodiversity, but a lot of them, it's usually the family that has to be responsible, and there's a lot of work to it. It's not, it's tough enough bringing up children. Believe me, it's tough enough both in mental health and how much it costs. I mean the cost of it. But when you also have neurodiversity, you're a parent, but you're also a caregiver. And there's also the thing of people. Parents have lives, they've got careers, and so what do you do with somebody that has neurodiversity? What schools do they go to? And sometimes there are programs for that. But then what happens when they reach 18 or something? Then what do they do? So what we were finding, and what my wife and my daughter were finding, is a lot of these kids have, they have talents. They're really talented kids, whether in music. But there are a lot of companies that are finding out, even with all the artificial intelligence and stuff, is that they're really good employees because they can be focused, and they can really be good at a lot of technical things. I mean, really good at it. And some of it may be that they have the skills. There's a difference between skill. We all have skills at doing things, but then there's also there's the social skills and the nuances. And this is what happens with neurodiversity: is sometimes sometimes you don't always get the clue. You don't pick up the plot.
Yes. We
And
talk about that a lot on this podcast.
yeah. So what it is, that you have to just be aware of it, and then to know that they're just not picking up the plot. Maybe you have to say it again, or you have to show them. And it's not a character flaw. It's just the way that the brain is structured, that they're just not getting it. Of course, I know a lot of people that supposedly are not on the spectrum that don't get the plot, or they, or they don't pick up the nuances. They'll just come at you and they'll interrogate, and then they just don't pick up, that maybe you're uncomfortable. Maybe you have to say, it seems like you have something on your mind, or it seems that that there's something you want to know. And maybe they'll pick it up. So I think my personal perspective is knowing what I know after doing 12 years, with Barbara and Barbara and Amanda on this, is I become more aware of picking up the clues, not only for myself, but other people when it comes to the autism community.
Yes.
I did I get off topic? I can't remember.
No, you're great. No, this is great. So you brought up families. I want to actually point more towards the families in my audience, the parents of children with level 2 autism, PDD-NOS, all their diagnoses. These are the families who are often the primary, as you mentioned, and sometimes only support system for their child, as you compared it to the European healthcare systems. So these parents are the caregiving right now, today, and many of them are doing it without a plan for what happens when they can't. What do you see happening to those families when there's no plan?
Well, if later on, I'll be happy to do. There's a poem I wrote about that called "If," and if you allow me, it's not a long poem. It won't take an hour
Okay.
to, but if there's a term of hope is not a plan, and I talk with my family about it. For ourselves, but also I asked them, said, well, what plan do people have if they have children that have neurodiversity that are not self-sufficient? And when I would define self-sufficient is that they can live their lives. However, depending on where they are on the spectrum, you may say, here's what it is with caregiving is that people say, to their parent, and they'll say, "Oh, my parents, yeah, they're on their own, or they're living independently." There's a difference between independent, maybe independent, but you still need caregiving, you still need help. And this is where a lot of people, they wait too long, and then they find out, yeah, they were independent, but things aren't getting accomplished. They're not going to the doctor's appointment. They're not taking the medication. They're not taking care of their health. There are a lot of things that they're not doing. But people say, "Oh yeah, they're on their own." And this is what happens: is that hope is not a plan. Is families, if you have your children that it's neurodiversity, or it could be a lot of other things. There are a lot of parents that are taking care of their grandchildren full time for a variety of reasons. Parents have addiction issues or mental health issues or all kinds of issues. So you're having intergenerational family issues, and it isn't sometimes for a short period. It can be for years. I mean, we know people that have brought up their grandchildren that the parents cannot be involved because there's just so many problems. Anyway, where I'm getting at in this is that yes, what should parents do? Well, first of all, they should consult with an attorney, and that they have an estate plan. You got to have an estate plan in order to say, look, what are your assets? What do how can you set up a trust? How can you set up powers of attorney so that if a parent isn't there, how can they or appoint somebody to be, the guardian for somebody that has neurodiversity to handle, maybe they're self-functioning, that they can get up and they can get dressed and they can do this and that, but maybe they don't have the function for financial situation, so that's set up. So you have a guardianship, and that's where an attorney, a good either elder care attorney or estate planning attorney that really has, experience. I don't know if it's special, but you got to have experience. My feeling is you got to have a feel for this. It
Hmm.
isn't just, one template fits all. It's,
Right.
you have a template and then you say, all right, how can we make this template fit, what the situation is? So you got to have a will, trust, guardianships, medical power of attorney, and, and whether you have some assets, no assets, a lot of assets, how is it going to be administered? Who's going to be the guardian? Who's going to be the people that will do the investing if there's an
Mhm.
estate, if there's real estate? Can a person live there? Do you sell it? What do? You have all those things set up, not just in time. It's do it now. Now, when I say do it now, I'm not saying do it on Friday. What I'm saying is that you say, look, it's first, let's find competent people we like that will help us with a plan, that we can tell the story, and then we'll have forms to fill out. But you're telling a story. I mean, that's really what you're telling, a story. This is my family. This is my story. This is what we want to do. This is what we hope for. This is what we will. These are the kind. This is the kind of people. How can we set up this structure? Because you're really setting up an infrastructure and you're transferring, and it's really not much different whether you have neurodiversity or you're having
Right.
people who don't have it's the same idea. You're setting up the room different. You know,
Hmm. Yeah.
you're setting things up, but you're setting up the room in a different way to meet with somebody's special needs. And I don't
Yeah.
mean that pejoratively. We all have special needs. In caregiving, there's a lot of special needs too. It's called home modification. But anyway, but to stay on the plot, then also if they have a wealth advisor or financial planner, is that they say, look, if somebody needs caregiving, do you have a caregiving plan? Do you need a long-term care plan? Do you have so much in assets? Okay, fine. You have so much in assets. Then, how is that set up so that if you have an estate that it's not so disrupted because you, the parent, have a caregiving need, and then you're using those assets for your care because they're not going to, they're not going to put you in a closet if you need care. They're not going to make you comatose. And caregiving is expensive. It's really expensive. And that, which is the same in the neurodiversity, is that if you need people to help with your kids or your family while you're going out working, making money, having a career, somebody's got to do it. And so there could be, they can go to be in schools, or they can have people that come in. It depends, the state, the situation, what the infrastructure. I also think too is what people understand. People are in my experience are just not always aware of the obvious. And what I mean by
Mhm.
that is, there are a lot of things out there, but if you're not paying attention, if you're not observant, there are a lot of things that are going on that you just don't pay attention to. But if you do, you say, gee, I didn't know, what all these people, what was happening to all people. I always use an example of, if you don't think that, people have issues, go to the pharmacy. Go when you go for your for your when you go to when you go to the doctor's office, when you go to the dentist, you're going to see people with all kinds of issues. Some will wear masks, some won't. Some will be, they'll be. You will see when you're in any kind of health situation or a hospital or emergency room, you're going to see the health spectrum. And
Mhm.
there are a lot more people in this, than this health situation than you think. I mean, one of the things in the last couple of years, I've been really involved in really understanding negotiating. And I'm with it's called Black Swan Group. I'm not an employee there, but I use their methods. Is that one of the things that brought to my attention is to be kind and be understanding to people. Where if they do something and they annoy you, you don't and then you react. Oh, what a terrible person. Is that you don't know what they're going through. They may have had an argument. They found out that they have a financial situation. They may find out that they have a health situation. They got the report. You got a problem. So they're thinking about themselves, and then they may not be paying attention to people when they're out in public. So one of the things that learned to be is more empathetic, to say, gee, I don't know you, but maybe there's something going on. So if I argue back, or if I'm mean to you, it just adds to the drama.
Mhm.
Anyway, keeping with your question, is that you need a lawyer involved, and then you also need, if you have a wealth advisor, financial planner, to create, to make sure that you, the family, have sufficient money, and you have a caregiving plan, because people don't think about it until until they actually need it. And then if you don't have a plan, then what are your options? Well, you could get a reverse mortgage. One of the things I also said, never let your life insurance lapse, and never sell it. Sell it, and if you have whole life, you have cash, you can sell it and get money. If you have a term plan, if it's convertible, you can sell it and get money, and that will help with your caregiving. You can get a reverse mortgage. There are a number of things you can do. It's not always the most efficient, but if your health, or you've waited too long, or the premiums are based on your financial, there are other ways you can do it. Or you can have the conversation with me and say, look, maybe a long-term care plan. It doesn't matter, what your financial situation. It's if you don't want to disrupt your estate and your assets, it's a lot less expensive to own a plan. Don't believe me? Drop your homeowner's insurance. Don't have the minimum for your car, and get the least expensive health care plan you can find. And then find out, how expensive it is, when you had all the add-ons, and then you say, but I have my health insurance. Yeah, you may have it, but if you don't have a comprehensive, guess who they're going to come to say, we take cash, credit cards, or checks. And
Yep.
and it isn't all, the credit cards that, you may not know where I'm getting at, and it may seem that I'm being facetious about, is that, most people don't always have the funds. And even if you do have seemingly a lot of wealth, there there are a lot of wealthy people have assets affluent, but don't always have the cash flow, and they may not always be in as good a financial shape as they may be. And I'll give the example of my mother. My mother was really affluent. I mean, we're not talking about ultra high net worth, high net worth. My mother was really affluent. And she owned a long-term care plan. And the reason she did is that even with all the money she was making, I asked her once, I said, "You're a estate planning attorney, you're not an insurance buyer. Why did you do this?" And she said, and this was after 3 times with my father having long-term care needs. She says, "Nobody has that much money to pay for their care and for their lifestyle." So, so if a family is planning, is that if nobody brings it up, and they should, is to say, do you have a long-term care plan? I didn't say that you had an insurance, but do you have a care, or if you don't like the long-term care, is do you have a caregiving plan? And if you
Mm.
don't, it's to say, all right, fine. That needs to be part of the estate plan, because if you don't, where's the money going to come from? Do you really think that if you're going to hire people, they're going to, hey, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to come in for free. Even if you're a volunteer, it's an expense to somebody, meaning the volunteer, because they're volunteering their time, but they also don't say and their money. I mean, it comes with it. Your time is also your money, and so if you have that, then you know I this may be the first time anybody's ever said this on any podcast. Is everybody, people are going to die. And when you do, what have you, how have you left the plan in place for, the heirs, the next generation, especially with people that are neurodiversity? There are things that they don't know how to do. But then again, look, I can give you examples of people that don't have neurodiversity, that don't understand how to handle their finances. They
Hmm.
really don't.
I'm going to stop the recording right there and give you a part two for this episode. I will pick up next week with Raymond Lavine and talk more about how to get a caregiving plan together and what the top 5 things you should start doing immediately in order to plan the plan. So if you are enjoying this episode or know someone who needs it, please share, please like, please subscribe. And I hope you'll hang with me for part two and listen to the rest of Raymond's discussion. If you have been putting off getting a care plan together, especially if you are the parents or the caregiver of someone who is neurodivergent, let this be the sign that tells you you better get to work. So until next week, be well, pickle friends.